finally bought my first house when I was 28. It was in a rundown part of town, in a very unsafe area to live in. You definitely get what you pay for, and I learned my lesson. Nothing unusual happened in the first month I lived there, and I thought I was definitely getting used to it. You know what I mean? To live there. But that soon changed. We only had light conversations here and there with our neighbors, but nothing more than that. Despite the area we were in, surprisingly, everyone seemed quite normal. Of course, there was one oddball among the few. He lived a few houses down, in a rather small, run-down house. It was even more battered than the other houses, including mine. He was probably about 45 years old, and from the first time I saw him, he always creeped me out. He was of medium height, slightly overweight, had very little hair, and almost always wore the same dirty-looking clothes. He talked to me a lot, despite the fact that I was not really interested in him. On more than one occasion, I let him verbally abuse me. There was something very disturbing about him. For example, one time I was walking home from the grocery store and he was walking on the sidewalk towards my house. When I pulled into the driveway, he stopped, turned around, and started talking to me. He started talking about his dead mother and how much he hated her and what a horrible woman she was. He seemed very angry and almost screamed as he told me these things. Another time, I was sitting on the porch with one of my friends, and he saw us sitting outside and invited himself in. He interrupted me while I was talking and started yelling about what happened at work. He was washing dishes in a restaurant, and he was telling us both how he hated it and wanted to leave. Then he started making racist remarks about some of the workers there. At this point, I didn't care to be polite anymore, and I went inside and signaled my friend Brendan to come with me. I closed and locked the door and looked out the living room window. Brendan and I were stunned by what had just happened, and started laughing uncontrollably at the strangeness of it all. Brendan had had too much to drink that night, and I thought it best to let him stay at my house. There was no bed in the guest room yet, so I let him sleep on the couch. In the middle of the night, as I was lying in bed, probably about to fall asleep, I heard a knock on the front door. I looked through the peephole and saw that it was a creepy man who wouldn't leave me alone. My instincts told me to ignore him, but my partner Brendan said so. I sighed, but the man looked troubled. His demands caught me completely off guard, and to be honest, pissed me off. He asked me for $50. I looked at him like he was crazy and said, "No, I don't have $50. He said okay and apologized for asking. I tried to close the door thinking it was over, but he reached out and put his arm through the door and leaned against it. "Wait, if you don't have any money, can you at least help me with something? Food, anything, a snack or something to get me through the rest of the night." I thought about helping him, but this guy was out of game and he didn't have much food anyway. It was 11 o'clock at night, and I was already quite uncomfortable with the situation, so I looked him in the eye, said categorically no, and told him to leave. I didn't feel any obligation to feed this man. If he didn't want to talk, I didn't have to talk to him. I was about to close the door again when he came in and grabbed me. Brendan immediately stood up and pulled him away from me. He must have realized he was outnumbered and couldn't win if he fought us. As he walked away, I saw that he was hiding a gun in his pants. Was this man going to attack me, or was he going to kill me? A few days later, when I told my neighbor about the incident, he was shocked. I told her about the man and the incident because she told me that no one lived in the house and that it had been abandoned a long time before she moved in, over 5 years ago at that point. When I called the police, they could not find anything to give me the slightest clue as to what happened inside or outside the house. I think there is no doubt in my mind that they were squatting to look for a place to live. To this day, I have never heard anything about what happened to me, and I cannot say with certainty what would have happened if I had been alone that night. I no longer live in that house, and it has been 3 years since I moved out. In 1984, when I was 11 years old, my single mother, 9-year-old sister, and 6-year-old brother moved into a beautiful craftsman-style house that I was told was about 80 years old. Shortly after we moved in, we discovered that the house was infested with cockroaches. I had never seen such a sight. When we turned on the lights at night, they scattered from every surface. We had to store all our food in the refrigerator, except canned food. We tried insect bombs and professional exterminators many times, but they proved resistant. Apparently, these creatures could withstand even a nuclear war. In any case, it wasn't their fault that we didn't live in this house for a year before fleeing for our lives. I just thought it was an interesting side story. To this day, cockroaches top my list of most hated insects. I remember my mother talking to my grandmother about the neighbor's creepy son. He was in his 20s or 30s. One day when my grandmother was washing the dishes, she looked up and saw him standing on the other side of the kitchen window looking at her. Normally, she would have kept this horrible thing hidden from us children, but at the time she told us to tell her if we saw him anywhere near the house and we were not allowed to play outside. She also woke up a couple of times to find him standing on the bed, and once she put a cloth with chemicals on his face and knocked him out. This is the part of the story I know the least about because I heard it years later. Maybe he thought she was dreaming. I don't know if anything else happened. I didn't ask him in case something happened. It brought back some bad memories for me. One afternoon when we were all cleaning up, my brother said he found a cigarette butt in the upstairs bathroom. It was strange because no one in our family smoked. My brother, a stupid 6-year-old boy, flushed the butt down the toilet before telling my mother. I still remember my mother trying to get the whole story out of my brother, upset that the evidence had been lost and thinking that my brother was mistaken or had picked up a cigarette butt from somewhere outside out of curiosity. Soon she stopped talking about it, and we almost forgot about it. I think it was a few weeks after that. My brother was spending the night at our grandparents' house, and it was just my sister and I upstairs. My mother's bedroom was downstairs. My sister heard a sound like a door slamming, but she insisted she heard it from inside the house and panicked. I told my sister to go to bed because she had only heard the sound from outside. A minute later, a choking coughing sound was heard just outside the bedroom door. It was a man's cough, and he was trying not to make a sound. I whispered, "Let's go downstairs." We felt an irrational urge to sneak out of the room and turn on the light in the bathroom across the bedroom to see if anyone was there. I then felt a strong urge to get out of the bathroom and go downstairs immediately. The scariest moment of my life was when I crawled down the stairs in pitch darkness. It was a spiral staircase surrounded by walls, the perfect place for someone to hide. The lights were out, the wooden steps creaked, and I was afraid to go down. We went downstairs, woke up our mom, and told her in a panic that there was a man in the upstairs bathroom. My mom started to tell us to go back to bed, but she could see that we were really scared. Mom went under the stairs and told us that there was nothing to be afraid of. Then she thought to close and lock the door to the stairs. She did that and called the police, but they found nothing. The next day, she called a police detective, a friend from high school, to check the house. Remembering the cigarette butt in the bathroom, he asked her to look at the upstairs bathroom window. It was a long, narrow, rectangular window. It wasn't very big, but it was wide enough for a person to enter. How many times had intruders climbed through the roof and climbed upstairs while we slept on the other side of the hallway? The windows dangled on their hinges. When my mother's friend lowered the window, it sounded like a door slamming shut. She said we had to leave the house immediately because the locks on all the windows were old and useless. That day, we moved to my grandparents' house. A few days later, when my mother went with my brothers and sisters to pack our things, the back door was broken, but the house was empty. A few years later, I heard that the neighbor's son had been arrested for rape and attempted murder. I still wonder what would have happened if I had turned on the bathroom light, if my mother hadn't locked the staircase door, if we hadn't left when we left the house. I also wonder if the cockroaches still infest the house. Thanks for watching, my friend.